Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Amarachi Ubani here, the reports we're looking at in this half hour. Well, several high-level talks underway towards ending Russia-Ukraine war. Russian President Vladimir Putin says Europe's demand for the end of the war in Ukraine are not acceptable. In the meantime, the White House confirms top U.S. admiral ordered second strike of Venezuelan vessel. Plus, Hong Kong leader orders special investigation into the Category 5 fire that killed 151 people trapped in high-rise buildings. Let's begin the program. Russia's President Vladimir Putin says Europe's demands for the end of the war in Ukraine are not acceptable. He made a comment during a speech at an investment forum ahead of planned talks with U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff in Moscow today. Asked about European involvement in the peace talks in Ukraine, he said that Ukraine had pulled itself out of the European settlement and accused Europe of having no peaceful agenda and of instead hindering efforts by the U.S. to solve the conflict. Meanwhile, the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says the peace process between his country and Russia should be open and fair. He's been waiting for outcome of Steve Witkoff's meeting with the Russian president. He sees a chance to end the war with Ukraine, but says there are some things that still need to be worked out. Zelensky is in Dublin, Ireland, making an appearance with Irish Prime Minister Michael Martin. The Ukrainian military says it is still holding out against Russian forces in the northern part of Pokrovsk. The White House has confirmed a top Navy Admiral Frank Bradley ordered a second round of strikes on an alleged Venezuelan drug boat. The strike carried out on September 2nd drew bipartisan concern amongst lawmakers. International media reported 2 people survived the initial blast and were still clinging to the burning vessel when they were killed, raising fresh questions about the legality of the operation. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth authorized the strikes but did not give an order to kill everybody, contrary to reports. She insisted that Admiral Frank Bradley worked well with his authority and the law in ordering the additional strike. Staying in the United States, but in other news now, Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem says she will recommend a travel ban on several more countries she claims are flooding the United States with criminal activity. She made the announcement in a post on social media where she said she met with President Donald Trump and decided to suggest a full travel ban on every country, filling America with killers, leeches, and entitlement junkies. Her words. Both President Trump and the Department of Homeland Security later shared her posts on their official accounts. It remains unclear which countries the proposed ban will target or when the policy could take over. The U.S. House Appropriation Committee is expected to hold a joint congressional briefing today to discuss what it calls increasing attacks and alleged persecution of Christians in Nigeria. Congressman Riley Moore made the announcement on his social media handle, saying the House Appropriations Committee Vice Chair and National Security Subcommittee Chairman Mario Diaz-Balart, joined by fellow appropriators and members of the Foreign Affairs and Financial Services Committees, will convene a joint briefing with the U.S. Commission on Interreligious Freedom and other experts to spotlight the escalating violence and targeted persecution of Christians in Nigeria. Congressman Riley Moore made the announcement on his post. He did say the roundtable will gather critical testimony to inform a comprehensive report directed by President Trump on the massacre of Nigerian Christians and the steps Congress can take to support the White House efforts to protect vulnerable communities worldwide. We'll move to Hong Kong now, where leader John Lee has ordered the creation of an independent committee to investigate the cause of a devastating fire that killed at least 151 people. Last Wednesday, 7 of 8 tower blocks at the Wang Fok court housing complex, which had been undergoing extensive renovations, went up in flames. Investigators have since found that a protective netting used around the buildings failed to meet flame retardant standards. At least 13 people have been arrested for suspected manslaughter, including directors of a construction company. The fire is the deadliest that the city has seen in more than 70 years, and the death toll could rise as officials continue to recover bodies. We'll return to one of our lead stories. The U.S. House Appropriation Committee holding a briefing today with a joint congressional briefing that is today. Congressman Riley Moore says the House Committee Vice Chair and National Security Subcommittee Chairman of the Appropriations Committee, Mario Diaz-Balart, will be joined by fellow appropriators and members of the Foreign Affairs and Financial Services Committees to convene a joint briefing with the U.S. Commission on Interreligious Freedom and other experts to spotlight the escalating violence and targeted persecution of Christians in Nigeria. Our correspondent in Washington, Maria Bird, joins us now. Maria, how is this roundtable different from the hearing they held the last time when they had, just as many people, analysts, they had security experts, they also had eyewitnesses and even victims of the killings here in Nigeria?
Yes, this briefing is really one that is looking at a different, so as you mentioned, the Foreign Affairs Committee held the last hearing. This is a roundtable discussion. The president obviously has been very clear that this is a concern for the United States. He has obviously, as we know, what sparred the hearing initially was identify Nigeria as a country of particular concern. And so the Appropriations Committee is really going to be evaluating, and obviously with the most recent attacks and abductions that occurred, which was covered widely here in the United States, being able to see what is actually occurring there, identifying whether or not this, investigating the Christian component to it. Obviously, the president has stated before that this is a heavily focused on the Christian community, even though we know during the hearings, people did mention the fact that there are Muslims that are also being abducted and killed through these attacks. And so I don't think that they're going to be discussing whether or not the U.S. will be putting boots on the ground anytime soon. It's speculated that that will not be the first course of action, but the Appropriations Committee, which is going to, as you mentioned, the financial side and also foreign affairs side, this is a different committee that will be having this roundtable discussion, really to inform the larger group of the House and congressional members around some of what the president has been discussing and getting some additional witnesses. We know it was a very limited number of individuals that were able to testify during the previous hearing. And so now this is an opportunity to have further discussions to see how the U.S. will be responding.
So if I'm understanding what you're saying, the committee will provide a comprehensive report to President Donald Trump. Will this also entail them speaking to eyewitnesses as well, as they continue their fact-finding mission, regarding Nigeria? How are they going to be able to compose this report if they're not speaking to witnesses and victims and support groups or even victims who are here in Nigeria?
I think that is what you're going to hear probably as a result. Even though they're not live streaming this, there will be reports, as you mentioned, and also even potentially some footage that will be able to be viewed at a later time of what goes on during the hearing. I think that's what you're going to hear from those individuals who have been longstanding. Obviously, the U.S. has been actively involved in watching terrorist attacks in the region for many years, going back to the Shebak girls. And so there are congressional members that remember kind of early intervention methods. And so they're looking at ways of really being able to even visit the region, to your point, having those first hand accounts of individuals who have experienced that, those who are from Nigeria. So I think that is going to be, we know in the last hearing, they did have a witness that was actually from Nigeria that they streamed in to provide some accounts. But at this time, I think these reports are going to be only focused kind of on what this committee is requesting, providing that to the president. But there will be committee members that will be speaking out as to exactly what you're saying about additional information from all sides.
So this will most likely be a holistic outlook, on what's going on in Nigeria. And if it is the appropriation committee, that must suggest that there could be financial or economic sanctions on Nigeria.
Well, I think that is what's being said by only one segment. I think that if you look at the larger components as to what many of the congressional members have been saying for several years, I don't think that that is going to be the number one focal point. I think that has been recently introduced. We've obviously seen the president in a very different stance, but around tariffs. And so financial implications have become kind of a way of the administration. And so they could be discussed, but whether or not we're at a point where we could potentially see actual financial implications, I'm not sure if we're at that point. I think that right now it's going to really be incumbent upon those congressional members who have been a part of this process for many years to be able to speak out to provide a context around how the U.S. should be supporting and working with Nigeria in regards to these terrorist attacks.
Maria, there's a lot of information floating on the internet, especially on social media, about America's decision towards Nigeria. I have seen, some reports suggesting there have been some military movement here in Nigeria. So, can you confirm to us whether there is some form of military activity from the United States in Nigeria, whether a covert operation or whether this is well known to U.S. media, whether in the form of mapping or directing or intelligence gathering and the such on the ground here in Nigeria, indicating that, a military move could be imminent?
AFCOM obviously is located in Africa from the United States. Has there been specifically any personnel and military action by the general in AFCOM in that station? We have not yet heard that there has been any specific movement in Nigeria. Have there been intelligence conversations? Have there been meetings? Yes, I believe that we have been privy to the fact that there have been some meetings. Exactly what those meetings have entailed, we're not quite sure of that. But actually having boots on the ground, entering the region, as you mentioned, in covert operations, has not necessarily been something that the U.S. Media has been apprised of. But we do know that there have been interactions between the U.S. military, generals, personnel, those high-ranking officials that are based in the continent, but nothing that has said that they have actually taken action to move forward on troops in Nigeria.
And as you peruse U.S. media in the U.S., Maria, what sort of conversations, surrounding the issues in Nigeria are of interest to Americans? We know that there are some groups which are very concerned, especially humanitarian groups concerned about, the lives of people being killed here. But for the rest of America, do they really know what's going on in this country? Do they indicate that they understand what's happening here?
So I think that American media, the most recent kidnappings and killings, I think were covered very widely here. So there is some understanding, some basic understanding. I don't know if they fully understand the full scope. I don't think many Americans are clear on why the president has an interest in kind of making Nigeria a country of particular concern. But I think that those advocacy organizations are very concerned, are glad to see the U.S. Speaking out and even having the U.S. media cover these type of events. But most importantly, I think that people are hopeful, especially those advocacy organizations, that the full story and the holistic approach as to how to address these type of circumstances understood, and understanding that the U.S. is not new to this. The U.S. has obviously been involved and been engaged previously. And so I think that's really where advocacy organizations want to ensure the U.S. is making very strategic, tactical, and the best moves forward, especially as it relates to conversations, communication, and the work and the efforts to try to obviously assist in any way possible to decrease the number of attacks and to eradicate, I think is what the U.S. would hope for, eradicate terrorism in the northern region. That's the number one piece. But there's so many Nigerians in the United States that are here that are obviously very concerned, very much a part of the conversation, but they are also requesting that the U.S. government provide them with more of a lens to be able to have a greater part in that conversation.
Thanks again, Maria, for joining us and for the update. Still ahead on The World Today. Pope Leo XIV leads interfaith gatherings at Martyrs Square in Beirut, Lebanon. Stay with us. Welcome back. An ECOWAS delegation has been in Guinea-Bissau, urging the military to step down and release results from the votes held on Sunday. That high-level delegation ended its mediation mission with no breakthrough, but pledged to continue talks with coup leaders later this month. Led by Sierra Leone's President Julius Maada Bio, the regional bloc traveled to Bissau seeking a return to civilian rule following the military coup last Wednesday. ECOWAS has condemned the coup and called for the reinstatement of President Umaru Embalo, who fled to Brazzaville after being detained, is now in Senegal. In his absence, the military installed former army chief Horta Intaa as head of a transitional government that has already appointed a new cabinet, largely composed of allies of the ousted president.
As we see, we've had today very fruitful discussions. Both sides have expressed their different concerns. On the part of ECOWAS, the chair of the authority condemning the coup and calls for the immediate restoration of constitutional order, which includes allowing the electoral process to a logical conclusion. On the other part, from the side of the high-ranking military officers, they express their reasons for why they take over of government. In their words, to ensure that they restore order and security in the country. The discussions have been very fruitful, and we look forward to further engagement that will bring this country back to constitutional rule and for the development, security, and stability of Guinea-Bissau and the people of Guinea-Bissau.
Elsewhere, homes and farmlands have been buried under thick mud across West Sumatra in Indonesia after deadly flash floods. Residents have been forced to evacuate to temporary shelters as they wait for emergency aid. Local media says torrential and prolonged rains have devastated parts of Southeast Asia, killing more than 1,000 people. From October to March, seasonal rains routinely trigger floods and landslides across the region, which is home to millions of people who live in low-lying areas. Experts, however, say this year's disaster marks the worst the region has seen in over 300 years. Pope Leo XIV has led an ecumenical gathering and interfaith dialogue with Lebanon's religious communities at Martyrs Square in Beirut. He referenced Lebanon's March 25th national holiday, saying St. Mary's embrace should guide the country and the entire Middle East towards peaceful coexistence. Islamic and Christian leaders took part in the ceremony and planted an olive tree. According to news reports, the event brought together around 300 invitees and featured 9 speeches from Muslim and Christian leaders. The Pope arrived from Turkey on Sunday for a 3-day visit, including meetings and a mass at the site of the Beirut port explosion. This is his first foreign trip since assuming office last May, succeeding the late Pope Francis.
In an age when coexistence can seem like a distant dream, the people of Lebanon, while embracing different religions, stand as a powerful reminder that fear, distrust, and prejudice do not have the final word, and that unity, reconciliation, and peace are possible. It is a mission that remains unchanged throughout the history of this beloved land. to bear witness to the enduring truth that Christians, Muslims, Druze, and countless others can live together and build a country united by respect and dialogue. Dear brothers and sisters, on March 25th each year, celebrated as a national holiday in your country, you come together to venerate Mary, Our Lady of Lebanon, honored in her sanctuary at Harissa, which is adorned with an impressive statue of the Virgin with outstretched arms, embracing all the Lebanese people. May this loving and maternal embrace of the Virgin Mary, Mother of Jesus and Queen of Peace, guide each of you so that in your homeland, across the Middle East, throughout the world, the gift of reconciliation and peaceful coexistence may flow forth like the streams flowing from Lebanon. May they bring hope and unity to all.
The words of Pope Leo XIV. Do you know what happens? El Castillo de la Espera has become a global center for Christmas craftsmanship, producing thousands of homemade or handmade glass ornaments every year. A workshop began 30 years ago with just 5 people. Today you have more than 120 people keeping that tradition alive. This town attracts visitors from across Mexico. During the Christmas season, families buying ornaments and watching the glass blowing process. According to the National Institute of Anthropology and History, Chinawapan produces, or the paradise of baubles, more than 70 million ornaments each year across over 370 workshops. A town designated a Pueblo Mágico in 2012 even provided ornaments used to decorate the chapel of the Virgin of Guadalupe in the Vatican grottos. That sure takes a lot of work and a lot of discipline. Thanks for watching The World Today. I'm Amarachi Ubani.